Hello there. So today I'm going to be talking about one of the main assessments for English A in the IB diploma. That's the individual oral commentary. Um, the main point of this video is to show you how to structure an IOC based on a novel, but some of the advice here can really help for any kind of genre that you're doing. Before I start, I should say the fundamental thing with the IOC is that you know the text really, really well. Because on the day it's a bit of a lucky dip as to which text you're going to actually be choosing. It's hidden inside one of a random selection of envelopes you choose. And so if you know the text you're doing very, very well, then you can use the skills in this video to produce what should be a very good commentary. But that's the fundamental thing to start with. If you don't know the texts, you've got a problem. Okay, so let's go through how it works. You get a 20-minute assessment, or 20-minute period rather of annotation where you can make notes and prepare. I would suggest towards the end of that period, you start thinking about your introduction. Your IOC is really going to have an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. The introduction is very important. You get to show the examiner that you know the text and this particular extract very well. So I've prepared a list of things that I would recommend you try and hit in your introduction to show the examiner that you've really got this. So I'll go through this first of all, and these are good questions to ask and good things to mention in general. Firstly, locate the extract. If we're talking about a novel, how did we get to this point in the novel? What's led up to this? Where is it going to go from here? So place the extract somewhere in the novel fairly quickly, just to show what's happening. Following on from that, what's the effect on the reader? When a typical reader has this extract, what do they take away from it? So here you want to throw in some big adjectives, some strong adjectives, to show really clearly and concisely what is the effect of that on the reader. Narrative voice is usually worth mentioning somewhere. Is the narrator reliable? Do we trust what they're saying? Have they got a vested interest? Are they biased in some way? Is it a third-person view? Just briefly mention the narrative voice and what its relevance is here. Theme is one of the biggest things you want to talk about. A theme is a wider issue or a general issue that affects a novel. So usually this is what the author's trying to put across. If we talk about The Great Gatsby, for example, it's a popular IOC text. It fundamentally is about Jay Gatsby, trying to rekindle a romance with Daisy, but on a thematic level, really that's Gatsby chasing the American dream or representing the American dream, and through Fitzgerald shows us really how that fails. So that's one of the main themes of The Great Gatsby. Moving on, a fundamental question is, why is the extract important? Why is that particular extract important? What do we learn from it? How does it make us feel? What's the writer trying to achieve? So there's some big questions there that's worth spending a bit of time thinking about. Moving on, the language that's used. It's not a poem, but there's still probably a fair chance that there'll be some important language used. That could be symbolism. It could be I don't know, any of the big things that you learn with literature. Pull out anything imagery, anything that you think is important, or anything that stands out. Make a point of going through that. You want to obviously summarize the extract as well. Do the basics, say what you see, what's happening in that extract. You can do that fairly briefly. And also the purpose. One of the big things is to talk about the writer in the extract, not just the characters. So what is the writer trying to get you to think or feel as a result of that extract? Okay, so those are the basic things to go through. If you like mnemonics, you can see at the bottom there, that list, the initial letters make lentils P. I couldn't come up with anything more catchy, but hopefully that will fix in your brain, and you can use some of those when you're doing your intro. So your intro probably wants to take about 2 or 3 minutes, and to go through those things, make it really clear to the examiner you know where you're going with this. Once you've done that, very slight pause, and give a signpost that you're moving on to the next stage of the IOC. When you're doing your annotating, I would recommend you break the extract or the poem up into several sections or chunks, and then that helps you show how the extract is developing throughout your commentary, and it also gives you various stages to talk about. As you go through, because if you're doing a novel, obviously you can't go through every single line by line as you would in a poem, perhaps. So you need to look at key examples. And then once you've got those key examples, you use those to explain all the things you mentioned in your intro. How is the writer achieving this particular purpose? How is the writer making us feel? Why is a character saying something or doing something? And then you work your way through each of the examples you have, all the time going back to the things you mentioned in your introduction to tie it all together. One of the biggest problems students have with the IOC is that they tend to merely summarize or put into plain English or easy English a particular extract and not really get into the heart of it. And so one of the main things at the bottom it says there is don't summarize but analyze. It's taken for granted that you understand on a surface level what's happening in the extract you're given. What they're really looking for is for you to get into more of the purpose of the extract in terms of the novel and how it makes you feel, and any relevant issues that come from it, and also obviously the language. The language that's used, analyze it, show you understand the effect that it's having. So this is the main body. This takes you through the main chunk of your IOC, probably about 7 to 8 minutes you want to spend on this. And then you move on to the final part, a conclusion, if you like. This really is where you have a chance to give a personal response and to say how it makes you feel, this particular extract. You could also mention what will happen as a result, what's coming up. Is this foreshadowing anything? Is anything major about to occur? Are there clues to that? What's the reason for that extract being there? And a couple of really good tips at the end here. Strong adjectives. Have some strong adjectives prepared for whichever text you're doing. Throw them in. The stronger the better. They're a really simple way of showing an examiner that you get this and you understand what's happening. And the last major tip is talk about the author. He or she was real, the character's not real. So the more you can talk about the author, the more you will sound like a literary student as opposed to just a reader of the novel. So all the time try and refer to the author. And lastly, very obviously, keep an eye on the clock. 10 minutes is roughly what you're aiming for. If you get to 12 minutes, the examiner will stop you and go on to the conversation part. There's about 3 minutes of conversation, so the whole thing is about 15 minutes. So keep an eye on the clock. Hopefully there is one as you're doing your commentary, you can see one, and so you can pace yourself and see how you're doing it. With something like this, the more you practice, the better you get at being at timing yourself, because it is an unusual type of assessment. It's not a natural type of thing to be talking for 10 minutes non-stop. So you need to be aware of how long that actually sounds like. Okay, thank you very much.